Hello and welcome to this ArtCAM demonstration where I'll be showing you how we can create this wooden sign using ArtCAM Express 2015. So if I go over to ArtCAM right now, and on the right hand side you can see that I've got 3 modules installed, and 2 of these are new for 2015. So we have the Bevel carving module, which means we can create angled or beveled edges to 3D letters or create a decorative edging. And we've got the Toolpath paneling module, which means we can create designs larger than your machining bed and then easily split the model into panels for machining. We also have the advanced 2D machining module, which allows us to do rest machining, add bridges and add lead in and lead out moves. So the first thing I'm going to do is bring up an image, and I'm just going to import that straight into ArtCAM. So I'm going to say OK to the standard sizing. I'm going to turn the transparency down to about 65%. I'm just going to zoom in slightly. And I want to trace around this top sign here. So I'm going to do that by creating a rectangle and simply drawing around the top sign. And clicking Create. The next thing that I want to do is trace around this curved edge. So I can enter Create Polyline mode. I want to draw smooth polylines, and I can just start clicking away. So once you've done that, you can toggle off the visibility of the bitmap and inspect your vector. And if you're happy, you can select them all and export those. So we go Vectors, Export. You can choose your file location, and I'm just going to call these sign vectors. And by default it saves those as an EPS. Now I can close this model down without saving, as I've already exported and saved my vectors. So now I'm going to create a new model with a height of 250 and a width of 550. I have the resolution up high. I want to have my origin in the bottom left hand corner, and I'm going to create it in millimeters. So now I can import my vectors. I go to Vectors, Import, and import my sign vectors.eps. And I want to position them in the center of my new model, like so. Now I'm going to start creating my text. So I'll go to Create Vector Text, click somewhere in your model, and then start typing Hank's Grill. I've got the size as 85 points, character spacing 38% of space, and then say Create. Now I'm going to open up the Transform tool and resize my text. So with the Maintain Aspect Ratio off, because I want to distort my text slightly, I'm going to input a width of 350 millimeters and a height of 85 millimeters and say Apply. Close that down, and I can centralize my text in my outer vectors. So with it selected, I can say Center Vector, like so. Now I want to ungroup my text. So the text has been created as a group of individual vectors. So I can right click, ungroup vectors. If I deselect them now, you see that my vectors are no longer grouped. So I'm going to select all of the letters that make up the word Hanks, Control G and group them. Select all of my letters that make up grill and Control G to group them. Now I'm simply going to use my arrow keys to position them in the correct location. Once I've done this, I can save this model. I'm just going to call it Hank's Grill. And I'm going to close it down. Now I want to create the vectors for my grill design in the center of the sign. So I'm going to go back and get one of my images and just drag and drop that into ArtCAM Express. You can see at the bottom here we've got all of these different shades of black which make up our very simple grill image. And I'm going to reduce the colours so we can create a vector from this image. So I'll go to this icon at the top, bitmap, reduce colours, and I can pull this slider down so we've only got 2 colours. Now if we zoom in here you can see it's quite pixelated there, but that doesn't matter because we can use the settings in bitmap to vector to compensate for this. So I want to create a boundary, not a center line. I've got a speckle size of 100 pixels, which means it's going to ignore the smaller areas, and I've got the smoothness set to 75%, and that's going to smooth out all of this area here. I want to create a boundary around the black colour, which happens to be my secondary colour. So I can choose secondary from the drop down list and say create vectors. Now if I toggle my image off, you can see that we've not picked out all of that pixelation from the image. So I'm happy with that, and I can say vectors, export, and I'll call this one grill.eps. Now I'm going to close this model down and reopen hanksgrill.art. I'm going to import my vectors. And I'm going to center them in my original vectors, like so. Then I'll just nudge it along so it's in the right position. Now all I need to do is resize the grill. So select the grouped grill vectors, enter the transform tool, holding down Shift and Alt on the keyboard. So the Shift maintains aspect ratio and Alt resizes from the middle. Once you've got your grill to the correct size, you are almost ready to start creating the toolpaths. First of all, I'm going to ungroup these vectors that I first imported. So I can do that by hitting Ctrl and U on my keyboard, and you can see my vectors change from purple to magenta. I'm going to just select the outermost vector and offset it 3 mm outwards, radius corners, and I want to keep my original. Now I'm using this offset vector to create an area clearance, so I just want to overstep the profile by 3 mm. Now I can shift select my text so I can create my area clearance toolpath. Click on the word Toolpaths. The second one along in the 2D toolpaths is our area clearance toolpath, and we can start inputting our parameters there. So we're going to input a finished depth of 5 mm, and we can start adding tools to our list. I'm going to add first of all a 12 mm end mill, and then I can add more tools to do rest machining because I have the advanced 2D machining module installed. So I can say add, and I want to put a 5mm end mill in there, and I'll also select a smaller 1.5mm end mill. We can scroll down, we can choose to have raster or offset strategy, and now I'm going to set up my material. My material is going to be 20mm thick. I can say OK to that. We can have a look at it in our 3D view if we want to, and then I can say calculate now. We can inspect our toolpath if we want in the 2D view. So if I expand Toolpaths on the right hand side, you'll see that we've now got our area clearance toolpath. We can click on the little plus next to that, and we've got our 3 tools in there. So if I just hide the rest machining toolpaths, you'll see first of all we've got our 12mm end mill coming in and machining away most of the material. Then we've got our 5mm end mill coming in and machining where the 12mm couldn't get in. And finally we've got the 1.5 going in the smallest areas. So I can simulate this toolpath now if I want to. Just right click on area clear and say simulate toolpath. Now it might not be that easy to see the simulation results here, so we can click on simulation, set up the material colour. So I'm going to choose pine and apply. Slightly easier to see, but we can also choose a depth colour. So I'm going to pick dark blue to be my colour. Click on depth colour and say apply, and now you can see where we've machined away. The next thing that I want to do is create my bevel carving toolpath. So I'm going to go back to my 2D view just so it's easier to select my vectors. I want to deselect all of the vectors I've got selected, and I'll just hide all of my toolpaths just for ease of use. So I can shift select my text, go to Toolpaths, and I can create a bevel carving toolpath. And this is because I've got the bevel carving module installed. I want a start depth of 0 and a finish depth of 2.5mm. I can select my carving tool, and that's going to be a V-bit carving 32mm at 100 degrees. And then I'm going to say calculate now. I've got a warning, and that's just telling me that my bevel will be truncated, which is part of my design, so I can just hit yes. Go to my 3D view, and I can simulate this toolpath. Now you can see where we've machined the bevel. What I'm going to do now is actually turn that depth carving off. What I'm going to do now is actually turn that depth colour off, as I don't think it's going to help us anymore. So we've got our bevel carving. Now I'm going to toggle my vectors on in the 3D view. I can select my grill vectors, and I'm going to create a V-bit carving toolpath. So I can click on Toolpaths, V-bit carving toolpath. I'm going to set there to be a maximum depth of 14. The start depth is 5 because we've already machined 5mm into the material. I can choose my carving tool, and that's going to be a 32-bit 120 degrees. Now I can say calculate now. And I can simulate this toolpath. And you can inspect that if you want. When you're happy, you can start creating some profile toolpaths. So again, toggle my vectors on. First of all, I'm going to offset my curved vector that I traced around on that original image. So with that vector selected, I'm going to say offset vector, 4mm, outwards, radius, and select resulting offset. We can also delete the original vector if you wanted to. So now we've offset this vector, I'm ready to create a profile toolpath. So I can click on Toolpaths, create a profile toolpath. I want a profile outside selective vectors, a finish depth of 14mm, and I can choose my profiling tool. So that's going to be our 32mm 120 degree. Select that. We don't need to add bridges as we're not cutting all the way through our block of material, and I can say calculate now. So I can simulate this toolpath. And we get our result like so. So now we've got our curvy edge of our design. I'm going to show my vectors again, and I'm going to select the inner rectangle vector that we offset to create our first area clearance toolpath. And I'm going to create a second profile toolpath to cut this out. So I'm going to go to Toolpaths, Profile. This time we want to have a finish depth of 20mm because we want to cut all the way through our block. I'm going to choose a 5mm end mill as our profiling tool. And this time I want to add bridges to hold my part in place. So I'm going to add 6 bridges with length of 10, thickness of 5mm. I'm going to have 2D bridges, and I can say add. Now they might be easier to see in the 2D view if I just turn the visibility of all my toolpaths off. And if they're not in the correct positions, we can edit them. So if I move down, you can see we've got edit bridges, and then we can move them around dynamically. I'm happy with where they all are, so I'm simply going to say calculate now. If I go to my 3D view, I can simulate this final toolpath. And there's my finished design. So now all I need to do is save and export my toolpaths. So I'll click on the top level of Toolpaths, Toolpath Operations, the first icon is Save Toolpaths. And you can see here that I've got my list of toolpaths, my list of tools, and all the tool numbers. And I just need to choose a location to save them to. So on my desktop I have a folder called Hank's Grill, and I'll just create a new folder in here called Toolpath. And in there we'll call it Hank's Grill and say open. Now I can choose to save toolpaths to separate files, but because I've got an automatic tool changing machine selected, I'm not going to do that. We could also append toolpath details to file names if we wanted to. So that's going to be more useful if you've got a manual tool changing machine. Once I've got everything selected and my post-processor selected, I can say save. Now when I navigate to that folder, see I've got toolpaths here, and we've got one tap file. So I can open that up in Notepad, and you can see my G-code. So I also want to demonstrate the toolpath paneling module. So I'll just close this down for now, and because I've got it installed, we've got panel toolpaths icon available under toolpath operations. So I can select that icon. I can input the size of my panels. So I'm going to put a width of 200 and a height of 280. If I turn on my vectors there, you can see my panels created, and they're numbered 1, 2, 3. So you can choose how to number them. It's not going to affect mine because I've only got 3 panels. And I can have a look at my bridges. So here I've got 3 bridges holding 1 piece in, 2 right on the edge of my second, and 1 on the third. So whilst in this mode, I can open up my profile toolpath. We can go to Edit Bridges. If I go to my 2D view, it might make this easier. And I'm just going to make sure I've got 2 bridges on each panel. So this is assuming the whole block of material is secured tightly down to my machine bed. So I'll move this guy over here. And now we have a bridge, 2 bridges on each panel. So my profiling toolpath, I will need to recalculate that and then close it down. And then I can simply save paneled toolpaths like so. I get the same dialog. I'm going to browse to a folder, create a new folder and call it paneled. Open that, we'll call it Hank's Grill again, and I'm going to hit save. If I navigate to that folder now on my desktop, inside paneled toolpaths, we have 3 tab files, 1 for each of my 3 panels. And again, I can open that and look at it, and you've got the G code there. And that's everything for this ArtCAM Express 2015 demonstration. Thank you for watching.